As you know, there are lots of people on the right who are trying to dispute that it was classified. The administration are disputing it was classified. I think certain things are indisputable. This was war chat, and it was clearly, by definition.
There you go, Piers. Pin him down.
The issue is not whether it was classified or not. The issue is, are these guys...
Of course it is. Of course that's the issue. What do you mean that's not the issue? That's the entire issue.
This is threatening the safety of the American people, and all Republicans in Congress can do is shrug their shoulders. Did Joe Biden have dementia? Did Joe Biden have dementia?
This is so pathetic. Biden dementia, Hillary, Hunter Biden, cock, crack, prostitutes, dicks, Hunter Biden's cock. I don't know who this guy is. This guy was somebody who got arrested on January 6th. I think went to jail for January 6th. And then Dave Rubin, who is probably the dumbest right-wing pundit in maybe ever. Like, this guy is about as shallow as a small pond.
Piers, I'm really glad you asked that question and framed it that way, because that's a great point. And we know that it's very rare to find people that'll be intellectually consistent when these things happen. I would predicate it first, just also hitting something you said in your lead up right there, which is that I think you could argue that every single decision that was made by the Biden administration was fraudulent, because he obviously was mentally compromised the entire time. You signed all of these orders by auto pen, and we don't even know if he knew about it, including just his last day in office. The way they pushed him out of running for re-election, et cetera, et cetera. So I think there's a broad sort of conspiracy, and I think you could argue probable negligence by all of the people who, many of whom weren't even qualified to have these jobs in the first place, because by his own admission, he often hired people based on their skin color. And
unbelievable spin on this week of all weeks, when his cabinet, multiple members of his cabinet, over 24, engaged in probably the most irresponsible thing maybe in the modern history for any cabinet. For all of them to have been like CC'd on this thread and literally none of them noticed, not a single one noticed, a journalist was tagged on the thread, is pretty astounding. The head of the CIA didn't notice that a journalist was in the thread, and Dave Rubin has the nerve to talk about Joe Biden hiring unqualified people is astonishing. The level of absurdity that we're at this point is off the charts.
Their sexuality, et cetera, et cetera. So, but okay, putting that aside, did Tim Walz absolutely Mike Waltz, Tim Walz, thankfully he's not involved in all of this. Did Mike Walz absolutely make a mistake here? For sure. Are they allowed to communicate on Signal? It sounds like, according to CIA Director Ratcliffe,
not when it comes to this specific information. According to DOD guidelines, not like, you are not supposed to use Signal to discuss like timing, weather conditionings, like specific weapon systems, targets. The DOD guidelines does not permit this.
Who testified yesterday on this. It sounds like it was pre-installed on some of their computers and they were told they were allowed to. But was there a mistake adding this guy in? Yes. Have we all made probably similar mistakes on iMessage?
No, I haven't. I have not made a mistake that even comes close to this. People that make these kinds of, like, there are reasons why we write the laws the way that we do to safeguard our intelligence, you know. It's supposed to be something that's taken very seriously. And even if you make a mistake like this, it could potentially be like felonious behavior that you could go to jail for. The carelessness of this story is it's beyond carelessness. It's just like gross incompetence and negligence.
Or on Signal when you have two names that are similar or initials that are similar. Yes, I would say one other thing on this, though, which is that I don't necessarily agree with you that he should be fired. You know, what we've seen out of this administration, I think, and if you just look at the entire thread in Signal, it's competent people like Tulsi and JD and Hegseth making cogent arguments for what they're doing. They show a little bit of disagreement. They talk about how Donald Trump feels about these things. And the American populace. So you see thoughtful policy.
Hang on, Dave, you missed out Waltz.
We should not see that discussion. That's the point. Somebody like me should not be privy to that kind of a discussion. And the fact that I know what they were texting each other 2 weeks ago is a searing indictment of this cabinet and their rank incompetence.
Is that deliberate?
On his comments in there?
No, you just listed 3 people and said, you know, they've done great.
Like, imagine, I guess we have a sense of the kind of spin that we would see if, like, imagine if Donald Trump, was giving an address to the country, right? And then they thought that the camera feed went out, and then Trump immediately started talking about super classified information. And everybody on C-SPAN was like, wait, do they know they didn't cut the feed? And all of a sudden, Donald Trump starts talking about like highly sensitive information that could get U.S. service members killed. And then the next day, the spin that Dave Rubin is going with is, well, actually, I think it's kind of neat that we got a glimpse into his, kind of cool that we got to see the process there.
Things and speak really well. You didn't include Mike Waltz. Was that deliberate?
No. Well, I think putting aside what he said in the chat, I mean, I think he's obviously qualified for the job. Nobody was really doubting that until these last couple of days. But
is he though? Because actually what we've seen in the last week with Mike Waltz, we've seen a series of interviews he's given in which I would seriously dispute whether he's up to this job. He didn't seem to have any straight answers for Laura Ingraham when he appeared.
Definitely did not take responsibility.
Personally, the more I see and hear of him, the less qualified he seems to be. And it's hard for me to imagine, Dave, honestly. You know, a lot of my family have served at a high level in the UK British Armed Forces. It is hard to imagine a more egregious thing than to be openly discussing times and weaponry use and intimate details of an imminent attack where US servicemen are going to be risking their lives in combat, and you're casually having this chat on Signal, and you've added a guy who is a Trump-hating journalist. I mean, and apparently we're supposed to believe this happened by pure chance because his name is under the wrong number.
He's about to do this thing where it's like, hey, man, I call balls and strikes. You know, I can criticize this administration when they do something wrong. But that seems sorely lacking in a moment like this. You should be demanding accountability. Like, at the very least, you should have someone like Waltz just say, like, I f***ed up, I made a mistake. But he's not even willing to do that. He's kind of vaguely alluding that maybe the journalist hacked the Signal thread, or, you know, Laura Ingraham is maybe suggesting that it was one of his staffers that inadvertently added the thing. Like, accountability is important to any administration, and whenever somebody makes a mistake like this, you would expect them to be fired or asked to resign. But, you know, Rubin here is trying to like give himself cover. We're like, well, see, I can criticize the Trump administration, but the criticism is just like so like tepid. It's so mild. It's like, yeah, you know, he made a mistake, but who among us hasn't done that before? Like, literally all of us, anybody who's watching this, we have not made that mistake.
It's fine. All of it is like,
and if we had been hired to do a job and we made that kind of mistake, everybody that's watching this right now would be fired, like from any job, right?
Over here, we had a ridiculous comedy show called The Keystone Cops, where everything used to go ridiculously wrong. It's Keystone Cop stuff. And I just think the honest, look, we talked earlier about having an honest intellectual response to things is always the best way, right? There is no getting away from this. This wasn't just a mistake, as you politely put it. This was a monumental, egregious breach of every security guideline
obviously
imaginable that could, and I stress the word could, because the military operation, as it turned out, was unaffected because
it could have been criminal and it could have gotten people killed. That's the point. That's why these protocols exist.
Goldberg did not do anything nefarious with this information, but had it got into the wrong hands, right, that could have imperiled the lives of American servicemen.
Yeah.
And for that,
I just think
would say, if he was a senior ranking official in the armed forces, he'd probably already be gone, wouldn't he? Piers Morgan Uncensored is proudly independent. Our sponsors mean we can bring it to you for free. Support for today's show comes from Beam. Now, on with the show.
I'm not defending Mike Waltz adding this guy, right? Like, Trump has to decide if he thinks that's an egregious enough error, and clearly it's turned.
What do you think, Dave Rubin?
Into a bit of a scandal here. That's why we're talking about it. So Trump has to make a decision on that, whether he wants to do the you're fired on that thing. As for them discussing this stuff on Signal, it still seems unclear to me whether they're allowed to do that or not. Again, Ratcliffe testified yesterday.
Not unclear.
Preloaded on their computers and other devices. So if someone's making the argument that they weren't allowed to discuss this stuff on Signal, that's different. But I haven't heard that argument made. As for again, I
don't know. Is he just not paying attention or anything? Like, there's plenty of people that have been making the argument that they're not allowed to use these channels for this specific purpose.
I'm repeating myself, but as for the point of him being invited in, if Trump decides that that is worth firing the guy, then that's Trump's decision.
I thought your job was a political commentator. Isn't it your job to convey these opinions? Now you have this deference, you know? Would you have that same deference for Joe Biden if something similar had happened? Well, he's the president. He gets to decide who stays and who goes. Like, your job is to, like, it's literally his job to give his opinion on stuff. And now he's just like, well, you know, it's up to Trump, really.
Go to the other two
and I would be fine with it. That's why he's the president.
Right. Before I go to the other panel, just to be clear, do you believe from everything that the Atlantic is now reported, including all these text exchanges, do you dispute that this was chat about war? Because it seems to me utterly indisputable.
No, well, it was chat about war. I mean, military strikes are
so we've
war
established
in
that.
essence.
So secondly, by definition, talking about an imminent attack on foreign soil by US military, by definition is highly classified information, right?
Of course.
Again, everything that was in the chat is fairly obvious.
No, I'm just asking you whether, as you know, there are lots of people on the right who are trying to dispute that it was classified. The administration are disputing it was classified. I think certain things are indisputable. This was war chat, and it was clearly, by definition...
There you go, Piers. Pin him down. Make him answer the question, right?
...highly classified.
Well, but the issue is not whether it was classified or not. The issue is, are these guys...
Of course it is. Of course that's the issue. What do you mean that's not the issue? That's the entire issue. It's the issue.
Are Marco Rubio and Hegseth and some of of these people involved in the chat, are they allowed to have those conversations on Signal?
No, they are, but it is being disputed.
So then what's the problem?
Well, the administration are disputing...
What's the problem? What do you mean?
That the information itself was classified. And I think it's indisputable that it clearly was.
Well, I think you'd have to speak to a lawyer about that specifically. If you were telling me... If you were telling me they weren't allowed to talk,
you need a lawyer to tell you that it's classified information. Talking about an imminent military strike, you need to talk to a lawyer.
About it on Signal for some reason, then that seems like a fairly obvious issue.
No, that's not an expert. No, I'm not asking that.
I'm personally not an expert.
You should be asking that.
Classified and what isn't.
I don't think anyone has to be a lawyer or an expert, Dave. Come on, if this is people talking with specific timings about an imminent attack on foreign soil by the US military.
But the question is, were they allowed to talk about it on Signal or not? That's separate than whether Jeffrey Goldberg should have been invited into the chat.
Right, but I don't think I could think of anything that could be more highly classified, can you?
I mean, really, like literally.
I'm not arguing whether it should be classified or not, but they're allowed to have conversations. The question is, are they allowed to have them on Signal? And again, Ratcliffe testified yesterday.
No, I'm not disputing that.
Ratcliffe did not testify to those specific details, to my knowledge, unless I missed some segment. Ratcliffe was simply saying that Signal is an authorized mode of communicating in certain contexts. There were Democratic lawmakers who read specifically from like the DNI and the DOD guidelines regarding this kind of protocol, and it was very clear that any kind of discussion about sensitive operational details should not happen on Signal. That's not up for debate, I don't think.
That Signal was preloaded on their computers and other devices.
Listen, on that, I think we need more clarity on that. Clearly, if you're just going to get random members...
We have a Presidential Records Act that requires these agencies to keep a record of these kinds of communications. Obviously a problem if you're using an app that's set to auto-delete all the contents of the thread in a week or 4 weeks or whatever it was.
Of the cabinet, adding whoever they feel like it.
Very clearly, they were using that app in a way to circumvent the Presidential Records Act. Otherwise, why was this not happening in a secure SCIF? Why was this conversation not happening through secure email? Why are they using an app to discuss these details when the app itself is going to delete that correspondence after a short amount of time? And
they have people's names in their phone under the wrong numbers. That's clearly a perilous situation, which has to be stopped.
Absolutely.
Has to be stopped. All right, look, I've given you a hard time simply because...
I mean, you would have to be the most credulous idiot in the world to think that the reason this happened was that Mike Waltz had Andrew Goldberg's number in his phone and he incorrectly labeled him. You would have to be the most gullible sap in the world to believe something so stupid.
There you go, Dave Rubin. You can take a hard time. And because actually it's really interesting to me, the intellectual honesty aspect of this. And I think you've been pretty honest, actually.
I'd love to hear the other panelists.
Oh, my God.
I'll
Piers.
Give credit for fronting it out.
Piers.
Let me bring you in here. I mean, the Democrats are clearly having a lot of fun with this, as they would. You know, you saw Hillary Clinton gleefully tweeting about it, and of course you would. And I understand why Democrats are so up in arms. Just, again, certain repetitive questions, but do you believe there's any doubt that they were having conversations about warfare or that they were involving specific timings and what kind of weaponry and aircraft were going to be used and so on. And secondly, that by definition, I think it's inarguable that that must be classified information.
Piers, I agree with you, and I don't think it's fun or funny, because this hypocrisy and incompetence is a gut punch to the American military. I was a captain in the Marine Corps. If I had shared highly classified operational plans over Signal, and yes, that's illegal.
He not only would have been fired, he would have been tossed in military prison.
My career would have been over, done. And Secretary Hegseth right now is lying to the American public. He is lying to Congress. He is lying to the military in order to avoid the same accountability that would befall a captain or a corporal. And those double standards are toxic to the good order and discipline in the ranks. But even worse than that is this is incompetence incarnate. This kind of conduct is why America is being out-negotiated right now by Russia over Ukraine. The Russians are protecting their Black Sea fleet. The Russians are protecting their assets in Europe. The Russians are getting sanctions relief, and they're giving up nothing. And the reason they are able to have these wins in these rounds of negotiations is because Donald Trump is sending these Keystone cops to get out-negotiated by hardened Kremlin apparatchiks. It's embarrassing and it's dangerous.
It certainly is dangerous. Brandon, I'll come to you now. I mean, I want to play a clip. Tim Miller interviewed Jeffrey Goldberg from The Atlantic, who broke this story and was the guy on the call. And he talked here about somebody being named in the conversations. Let's listen to this.
There's a covert CIA operative named on the thread, right? So I mean,
well, yes, and I withheld her name from this. They named somebody who's an actor.
They dispute this. They say it was Ratcliffe's, like, I don't know, chief of staff or second in command or something like that.
CIA officer in this thread, which is on Signal, again, a commercial app in which I'm watching. You know, and I withheld it. I didn't put it in the story because she's undercover. But I mean, the CIA director put it into the chat.
I just found that, again, staggering. If this had not been, I mean, it's unbelievably good luck for the administration that it was Jeffrey Goldberg, even though he hates Donald Trump and the administration. If in Mike Waltz's phone, he had, say, the Russian ambassador's number, which had accidentally been attributed to whoever he was trying to add to the group, and that CIA operative's name was then in the hands of the Russian ambassador as a CIA operative who might even be operating in Russia, for all we know. You can see how cataclysmic this could have been if it had been somebody else who'd been casually added to that group. I mean, Brandon, can you defend any of this?
I would go on record as saying I think it's a misstep for sure. But I mean, we could sit here until the end of time and come up with hypotheticals about what could have happened and how cataclysmic and terrible it could have been if this.
What even is this argument? Like, yeah, we could explore why this thing was really bad, but, you know, should we do that? Like, well, yeah, that's how these laws get written in the first place, is you consider the negative consequences of careless handling of classified information, and you craft laws to make sure those bad things don't happen. And this guy's like, well, yeah, we could do hypotheticals about how, you know, U.S. service members could have been killed or anything, but, you know, what's the point of doing that? Like, what?
Person had been added or that person had been added. But
who is this one? This guy is a right-wing pundit who was there on January 6th, who breached the Capitol and was found guilty or pled guilty and went to prison. January 6th, this guy right here.
An incredibly successful airstrike, which in the long run is going to have a very good impact on global trade and security around the world. So, I mean, that's what we really should be talking about, was that this was an incredibly successful mission.
Really? We shouldn't talk about this insane intelligence failure? We just shouldn't talk about that because what? Because you did a successful military strike?
And sitting around.
You don't want to talk about the fact that this military strike could have been negatively impaired because of these people's behavior? You don't think that's relevant to discuss in this context? Okay.
Wasting time, I think, talking about all the terrible things that could have happened.
So just to be clear, all right, just to be
wasting
clear,
time.
If
what?
The National Security Advisor.
He's just making an argument against all accountability here. That's what he's saying. Like, we just shouldn't talk about the mistake because he doesn't really give a reason. We just shouldn't talk about it.
Under Biden, had done this, you would be very keen, would you,
of course,
that eventuality, to be extolling the virtue.
Bro, if Biden was president right now and the Republicans were in control of Congress, we would already have seen articles of impeachment drafted. Obviously. It would have happened day one. They would have said, like, this is, not only should Biden be impeached, but he should be prosecuted for this. That's what they'd be saying.
Of the successful mission, and not the fact that he'd added some random journalist to the group chat with the foremost senior defense people in the country, talking about an imminent strike on the Houthis. Be honest.
Well, if I think if we're going to compare the two things, then let's compare them across the board. Because number one, I would
he's going to deflect to the Afghanistan withdrawal. I think
say that if a reporter from the Atlantic or most left-wing media outlets in the United States had been added to that, they probably would have contacted the Biden administration and let them know that they had made an error. And then
no. This is the biggest scoop. Like, any journalist that this would have landed at they would have felt no personal loyalty to Joe Biden. Are you kidding me? They would have been thinking like, oh my God, I am the luckiest journalist literally ever. Somebody from the Biden administration added me to a text thread. You know, let me drop the story and advance my career by like 10 years, you know.
And they would have run cover for them in any possible way to make sure that this never got out and never escaped.
Talk about hype. He didn't want to entertain hypotheticals a moment ago when it came to like how the military strike could have been impacted. And now he wants to do hypotheticals about what a journalist would have done if Biden was president. Interesting. Okay.
And to that point, I would say that this kind of thing probably did happen under the Biden administration numerous times, and we never found out about it because
I mean, I just don't even. It's hard for any society to function when you have people in prominent positions of influence that are willing to just say whatever the pops into their head. I don't know how you deal with this as a society. You know, like, are gulags a bad idea? I don't know. Maybe Hassan is right. Maybe Ogre Boy is right. Maybe we need gulags at this point. I really don't know. You know, should we allow this person to live with freedom and rights? It's possible that the authoritarian way is the way to go. And, you know, I'm just being naive. When you have the entire like conservative media apparatus that are willing to like literally say anything to duck accountability, with no scruples whatsoever. Like, these people are completely unscrupulous.
You don't know that.
The United
you
States.
Don't know that.
There we go. Piers, I mean, it took us about 5 minutes to get to the MAGA's favorite excuse for everything, which is to whine about the media. It is amazing what snowflakes the MAGA Republicans have become. Everything bad that happens, they blame journalists for. Can you guys ever take responsibility for your own mistakes?
No.
You know, it's interesting you say that.
I did. No.
It's interesting you say that, because if I honestly, look, Donald Trump wasn't involved in this. And if I was Donald Trump, I'd fire somebody.
What do you mean he wasn't involved in this? He appointed all these jokers. I'd
make a point of saying this really matters. Secondly, and I would fire Mike Waltz if I was him, for what it's worth. But secondly, I would also, I think, urge everybody that was on that call who's now being interrogated about it. I've just seen Pete Hegseth. You know, I like Pete personally. I've known him, worked with him. And he's issued a statement saying, let me get this straight. The Atlantic released the so-called war plans, and those plans include no names, no targets, no locations, no units, no routes, no sources, no methods, and no classified information. Those are some really shitty war plans. It only proves one thing. Jeff Goldberg has never seen a war plan or an attack plan, as he now calls it. And then I'm reminded that one of Pete Hegseth's messages on the group...
Wind, fire, water...
was weather is favourable, just confirmed with CENTCOM. We are a go for mission launch at 14:15. Strike drones on target. And this is the Houthi WhatsApp group. Not WhatsApp group, Signal group. Brackets, this is when the first bombs will definitely drop. It is hard to imagine anything more specific than that. There's the exact time, the exact way.
Well, the exact location. That's like the only thing that's missing is like literally the GPS coordinates of this.
They're going to do it. That's the first thing we're going to see. And if you're a nefarious person reading this, you could obviously use that information in a very damaging way to America. Now, I simply say this to you: I wouldn't care if it was the other way around. It happened under Biden. I would be exactly the same with Democrats that tried to defend this. I would want some intellectual rigor and consistency, and the ability to say this is a massive of epic proportions, and someone's head's got to roll. because otherwise it means people don't.
That's what I don't get. Like, if you're MAGA, I feel like you should be like, somebody's got to take the heat for this, right? Like, if you're a MAGA supporter and you support this president and this president's agenda, and you want this president to be successful in the execution of that agenda, then you should want to discard anybody who makes that job more difficult. Like, if this was Biden, I'm telling you with 1000% sincerity and honesty, if this happened during Biden, I would be like, that person has to go. All of these people that were in on that thread are going to make Joe's job more difficult, and they have to go. Like, just rip the Band-Aid off. It doesn't look great for the administration, but you know what looks worse? Denying that it happened, blaming signal technology, and deflecting blame to the journalist who was roped in on this thread. Like, it's unbelievable. Like, if you want this president to succeed, you should want accountability. You should want heads to roll. Like, whatever, maybe I supported him before. He was like super pro MAGA or whatever, but he's got to go, man. Heads got to roll here.
I don't think it's serious. And Pete needs to stop putting out these statements which try to minimize stuff that is contradicted by his own messages.
Yeah.
And I say that as a mate to him. Right? So, look, we've got Tim Miller's joining us now. Let me bring Tim in at this stage. Tim, I like your interview with Jeffrey Goldberg, but it just seems to me, and, you know, again, just to stress, if it was the other way around, I'd say exactly the same thing. I don't care which side is doing it. But anyone that tries to defend this or downplay the severity of it or play whataboutery or anything else, I think it needs to stop. This needs to be.
Who is this goofball? This is Tim Miller of the Bulwark. He's like a Romney Republican, never Trump guy. He's good. He's good. He's on the Bulwark podcast. I think he's doing good stuff.
Accepted for what it was, a tremendous error.
How do I say this name? XMR. Thank you so much for 18 months, buddy.
Which could have had tremendously serious consequences. And if it was a senior military person who'd done it, they'd already be gone.
For sure. Look, to that senior military example, look, Pete Hegseth has already fired several generals. He's fired several people throughout the Department of Defense. So is Elon Musk as part of the Doge process. Imagine, we're doing the hypotheticals. What about Biden? I think the more apt hypothetical is, imagine if, a low-level general who was involved in this operation had texted the exact time and location of a military strike to an anti-Trump journalist. Now, and imagine if that general is one of these woke generals that they're going after. Maybe it's a black general or a woman. Imagine what Pete Hegseth would be saying today. Imagine what Dave Rubin would be saying today. We know what these guys would be saying. These woke generals, they're the deep state. We need a court-martial.
Obviously.
Investigation. This person needs to be fired.
Obviously.
We can all agree that that is what would be
happening. If this had happened when Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin was serving in his tenure, we all know what these unscrupulous, unprincipled losers would be saying right now. They'd be saying, this is what happens when you do DEI. Picked him because he was black. This is what happens when you do DEI. Not only should he be fired, he should go to prison. That's what they'd be saying right now. Everybody obviously knows this.
Happening today. That person, if they were a 2-star black general or female general and they had done this, they would be fired today.
Obviously.
I think that's very obvious.
Yes.
And so, look, Pete Hegseth might be a mate of yours, might be a good person. I don't know. I've never met Pete Hegseth. But to me, you read this signal chain, and this looks like it got its way in over his head. And this is not, if General Mattis here, it's impossible to imagine General Mattis texting emoji.
Who was it, Susan Rice? And other people were talking about, like, there was no reason to send these messages. He was showing off. When he was giving these up-to-date, like, details of, like, we did this, and we struck this, and 345 SAM missiles, and, like, there was no reason for him to do it. He was literally just showboating. There was no point in it. He was literally just showing off. Like, look at how important I am. Look at all these things that I'm doing.
And all caps, pathetic, to like a signal.
He was pussy bragging about war. That's exactly what it was. Yeah, that's exactly what it was. Girl from the bar last night, but like with military stuff. That's what it is.
Group chain, preparing them for when the strikes would be. It's just, it signals to me somebody that's not serious. It's not up for the job. The fact that then on the chain, he says, we have 100% operational security here. and there's someone on the chain he doesn't know. Like you didn't check to make sure you knew everybody on the chain. I think it shows just an unbelievable lack of seriousness. And I think clearly, if this was one of the woke generals that Pete Hegseth doesn't like, they would be fired today, and there would be a DOJ investigation targeting them.
Yeah.
All right, Dave Rubin, a lot to unpack there, but I mean, a lot I agree with, I have to say. Look, let's talk about the Signal aspect. If they, as you say, and I've seen that report, if they were encouraged to use Signal, and in fact it had been put on a lot apparently of their phones and so on when they came into their positions, so they're allowed to use Signal, which is deemed to be one of the more secure ways of communicating. And you believe, as Pete Hegseth clearly did, that you've only got on there the Secretary of State, you know, the Defense Secretary, the National Security Advisor, and so on. In other words, all the senior members of the cabinet that would be involved, plus one or two hand-picked staffers who are at a very high level. If you assume that's who you're talking to privately, then I'm not too fazed about emojis and stuff like that. You've got to have some presumption, I think, when you're conversing with people at that level, that you presume to be that level, that it will remain private. So I'm not sure I can get too exercised about that part of it. The thing that still exercises me, though, is just that if it hadn't been Jeffrey Goldberg, but had been somebody who wanted to really damage the administration, they really could have done, and you could have seen American planes blown out the sky.
Sure. Look, there's a couple of things going on here. First off, I think your guest in the center, I'm sorry, I don't remember the congressman's name. I think he said it was illegal to use Signal in these chats. Now, again, Ratcliffe, who is the CIA director, is saying, as you just said again, that it was preloaded on their computers and devices. So I don't think that's illegal, but if there's some legal portion of this.
Well, just for the record, it's
you are not allowed to share
Jake
classified material over Signal.
Well, just to introduce you again, Jake, for Dave, it's Jake Auchincloss, who's a Democrat congressman from Massachusetts. So, Jake, you want to respond to him?
Wait, this guy's a serving member of Congress, and he went on Piers Morgan? Honestly, we need more of this. Like, honestly, yes, we need more people going into these spaces, and fully taking the gloves off. By the way, I think it's unironically like really great strategy for Democrats to start like cursing more and just like generally just be meaner. Like no more of this high road shit. Like start cursing, start saying shit. Start getting really like aggressive in your terminology. Like that is a currency in the modern era. People perceive cursing and that kind of like discourse and dialogue as very authentic in the modern era. People curse. Like my generation particularly, we were raised with South Park and Chappelle Show and the internet, you know, at the dawn of like the edgelord internet stuff from the mid to late 2000s, like when all this stuff kicked off. And we just don't react to cursing the way that boomers did. Like boomers, when they heard cursing, were like, wait, what? You can't say that. At least that's how I was raised. Like in the type of environment that I was raised in, like cursing was like really, really bad. And I think like millennial parents and to a lesser extent Gen X parents are just way more lax about this kind of communication. Like, you know, like we've seen culturally, we've seen just like way more movement towards cursing being accepted in the mainstream, you know. Maybe not that. Okay. So like not always, right? Like there's bad examples of it. Okay, listen, we got the fine. Listen, I take your point, right? You need to be like, if you don't curse, like, listen, if you don't normally curse, then don't do it. Like, don't force it, right? But like, if you curse in your private discussions, just do it. Just say it. Just like say these things. My generation of Gen X are becoming like the dominant voting bloc, and we just don't have the same hangups. And this idea that we need to be very prim and proper and adhere to strict decorum and it's just putting us on the back foot. And so anyways, yeah, but along that, something that comes with that is like showing up on podcasts like this. Like Piers Morgan does lolcow content, right? It's pretty remarkable what his content has become. It's sort of like he seems to have adopted sort of like Twitch lolcow debate stuff as his format, and he's been tremendously successful in that way. Like he's getting so many views on this stuff. 500,000 views, 1 million views, 1 million views, 500,000 views. It's like all of his videos are between 500,000 and like 1.5, 2 million views. And so we shouldn't say like, oh, we're above going on Piers Morgan. Like, no, get in there and get in there, tangle. Like, it's so easy to make Dave Rubin look stupid too. Like, he's just not a bright guy. He's a really kind of slow individual. Get in there and make him look dumb.
Okay, so well, there's some issue as it pertains to whether
you cannot share classified material over Signal.
Okay, so that's interesting. So, all right, so Congressman, just to be clear, it is illegal to share classified information over Signal. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yes, the military has its own entire network. They have SCIFs inside the homes of every senior military commander. They have SCIFs co-located with the Secretary of Defense precisely so that they are not putting highly classified operational plans on commercial messaging apps. It's illegal. Full stop. And Pete Hegseth needs to own that accountability, because if this happened to a corporal or a captain or a general, their career would be over. He shouldn't have this job in the first place, and my goodness, he certainly shouldn't have it now.
Dave, I mean, if it turns out that that is correct, and I don't dispute what the congressman just said, then, you know, should Pete Hegseth consider his position? It's a legitimate question which Republicans would be asking of a Democrat.
I don't know. I can only hear the information that you're hearing on the fly the same exact way. If it turns out that they were told you are not allowed to put classified information in a Signal chat, and they went ahead and did it, even though it was preloaded on their computer, and Ratcliffe testified that he was briefed by people at the CIA.
He's such a little rat, this guy. He's such a little rat. He still tries to sneak in these like permission structures. Like, he can't just simply acknowledge like, okay, what they did was not only wrong and irresponsible and kind of bafflingly irresponsible, but it was illegal. He can't do that without being like, even though it was on the computer when I got there.
About using that stuff. Well, then there's a secondary problem. And also,
Facebook is preloaded on some phones. Can they just put military plans out on Facebook? Yeah, that's a good point, right?
It should be reiterated. I don't think anyone here is defending the fact that Mike Waltz apparently let this guy into...
Wait, is Facebook really preloaded on phones? Is it preloaded on like Samsung or whatever?
Chat. So there is some intellectual consistency here, and it's up to Trump. Trump has to decide what he wants to do right now. Does he think this is a big enough scandal and it's worth firing a guy that he just brought into NSA or not?
It's not up to Trump. See, this is the problem with the way Republicans. This is the problem with the way Republicans are acting these days, is they act like a board of advisors.
Democrats just had 4 years of a president with dementia and a completely unqualified cabinet and virtually everyone that had anything to do with it. So tell me more about the Republicans.
This guy.
The Republicans.
Oh, this is him on the back foot. He feels like I got to go on offense here. They're making me look bad. Biden was demented.
Republicans act like a board of advisors to a CEO as opposed to a separate and co-equal branch of government. They have abdicated their responsibility. Mike Johnson acts like a courtier. John Thune acts like a courtier. They're the ones who confirmed this junior varsity squad of people who are getting out.
What do you mean it has nothing to do with them? What do you mean? They've opined on this issue and they said, well, it's not a big deal. Of course he's the Republican leadership of the House. What do you mean it doesn't pertain to him? He's a part of the party leadership, Dave. Like, what do you mean it doesn't pertain to him?
Competed by the Kremlin and out-negotiated, who are being laughed at by the Chinese Communist Party right now as they prepare to blockade Taiwan. This is threatening the safety of the American people. These people are not fit for the office.
Joe Nick, what's up, buddy?
Joe Nice. And all Republicans in Congress can do is shrug their shoulders. It's pathetic.
Did Joe Biden have dementia? And we have...
This is so pathetic. Biden dementia. Hillary. Hunter Biden. Cock. Crack. Prostitutes. Cock. Dicks. Hunter Biden's cock. Dementia cock.
4 years of him. Do you think Joe Biden was mentally competent to be president for 4 years? Do you think Joe Biden...
It's really pathetic flailing here. Emails, cock, Hunter. Emails, cock, Hunter. Emails, Biden, dementia.
The whataboutisms.
What's not whataboutism? I'm just asking you a question.
Do we want to talk about Barack Obama's tan suit as well? You would do anything to not have to talk about the fact that the Secretary of Defense
There you go, yeah.
To be fair, both sides.
Was Joe Biden mentally...
Both sides...
Guy.
Let's all accept Joe Biden.
And he's about to do a both sides shit here. I hate my life.
Was mentally unfit for office. Let's accept that. As we've been talking,
one of us isn't.
There is a report now that Pete Hegseth and other Trump administration officials are being sued by government watchdog groups.
Why stop there? Why don't we go back to like Ford? and Carter. Let's start complaining about Jimmy Carter and gas prices there. Oh, you didn't say anything when Jimmy Carter was president and gas prices went up. Oh, now you want to talk about responsibility and top secret classifications and responsible methods of communicating top secret information. Okay, what about Jimmy Carter's gas prices? Okay.
For using Signal to discuss the military plans to strike Houthi targets in Yemen. American oversight alleges in its lawsuit.
You didn't have anything to say when John Adams was originally proposing that the president have way more power than he does now. You had nothing to say about that, right? Yeah, you had nothing. Like, why stop there? I mean, if we're going back in the past, let's go. You know, you didn't have anything to say about FDR's New Deal policies and the way that it, you know.
The chat on the unclassified commercial app that mistakenly included the Atlantic's editor-in-chief, Jeffrey Goldberg, violated federal records law. So that does appear to be something that is now an active lawsuit. Tim Miller, just to bring you back in on this, what do you think should happen? I mean, in terms of accountability, at the moment, there's a sort of Trumpian playbook of them all doubling down, launching a lot of water battery attacks back.
We didn't do anything wrong. And if we did do something wrong, it was a staffer. And if the staffer did something wrong, it's actually not that big of a deal. And if the staffer did something wrong and it's not that big of a deal, well, you know, actually they had Signal on the computer before I even got here. And, but also possibly the journalist hacked into the thread, or, you know, I take full responsibility, but I had nothing to do with this and we're investigating it. And, you know.
But nobody wanting to actually say it's a fair cop, Gov, and I better stand on my sword.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think that there should be an actual investigation into this. I don't really have any hope that the Pam Bondi or DOJ or Kash Patel FBI will take this seriously, but I think there should be.
No, Trump said that Tim Waltz, or not Tim, is it Tim? Whatever his name is, Waltz. What's his name? Dave Waltz? I don't know what his name is. He said that Waltz is Mike Waltz. He said that Mike Waltz is the one that's investigating this, when Mike Waltz is the one who added the journalist to the thread.
And I also think that, sure, Mike Waltz should be accountable for this. And Mike Waltz was on Fox last night. This is crazy, Piers. Mike Waltz was on Fox last night suggesting to Laura Ingraham that Jeffrey Goldberg might have gotten on this Signal chat deliberately. That's what he said. He said it might have been deliberate. I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist. That's our national security advisor. Like, that's a very serious accusation. He's saying that a magazine editor might have committed illegal espionage. And so, but he just doesn't want to actually take the accountability. Because to find out whether or not that was true, you'd need to have a real investigation by DOJ or by a special counsel, and they don't want that because he knows it's him. So he just wants to throw out those lies willy-nilly, and it's kind of an absurd lie, really, actually, if some boomer magazine editor was able to sneak onto the chat.
At this point, I would like deflect to Brandon and Dave. I'd be like, I want to ask my Republican counterparts on this panel, do you seriously think that this journalist potentially hacked their way? Like, I want to know, can you be on the record as saying, like, do you think this is possible?
Illegally, that I think speaks even more to how incompetent the administration would be, other than the true story.
Yeah, I found it slightly more disconcerting that his second explanation, because he had quite a few on the Laura Ingraham interview, was that somehow Jeffrey Goldberg's number had been under somebody else's name in his contacts list. And just to remind the viewers watching this guy is the National Security Advisor for the United States of America. The idea that he doesn't know whether everyone's name in his contacts list is attached to the right number and it's
inconceivable. It's how dumb do you have to be to believe something so stupid?
Therefore be communicating with God knows who without any actual knowledge that they are who he thinks they are is frankly terrifying.
These people insult all of our intelligence, by the way. Like, it's so insulting. That's what it is to live through a Trump presidency. Every day, your intelligence is insulted. Every day. When they propose this ridiculous, preposterous shit. Every day.